Last week, I was sitting in a quiet library when the person across from me suddenly gasped. He didn't just gasp, he scrambled backward so violently that his chair screeched against the floor, drawing glares from everyone in the room. He was staring at a small plastic toy spider that a kid must have left on the table. His face was pale, his breathing was shallow, and his hands were trembling as if he had just stared down a predator in the wild. What was fascinating wasn't his fear, but the immediate aftermath. Once he realized it was just a toy, he didn't laugh it off. Instead, he looked deeply ashamed. He kept apologizing, muttering about how stupid he was and how he couldn't control his own nerves. To him, this sudden surge of anxiety was a defect, a sign of a broken mind that couldn't handle a simple piece of plastic. But as I watched him trying to settle back into his seat, I couldn't help but think the exact opposite. I felt like telling him, actually, that reaction is proof that you come from a long line of winners. Thousands of years ago on the African savannah, the brave ancestors who didn't get anxious when they heard a rustle in the grass were the first ones to get eaten. They didn't pass on their genes. The people who survived, the ones who became our ancestors, were the ones with a hypersensitive alarm system. They were the ones whose bodies stayed on high alert, ready to bolt at the slightest hint of a threat. The problem we face today isn't that our brains are broken. It's that we are walking around with a high-tech survival engine, a structure called the amygdala, that is still running on software designed for the Stone Age. It's incredibly fast, reacting long before our rational mind even realizes what's happening. It's why you might find yourself clenching your fists at a performance review or feeling your heart race over a credit card bill, even though you can't fight a bank or run away from your boss. We are the children of the anxious survivors, yet we live in a world where that very survival instinct has become our greatest burden. It creates a bizarre paradox. The same mechanism that kept us alive for millennia is now the very thing that stops us from living. Why does this tiny part of our brain hold such total power over our logic? And more importantly, if we can't talk it out of being afraid, how do we actually rewire it to let us be at peace?
That is the ultimate paradox of modern life, isn't it?
It really is.
We are navigating a world of Wi-Fi and spacecraft with a nervous system that was finalized when we were still worried about saber-toothed cats.
Right.
That moment you described in the library, that visceral, immediate terror followed by the intellectual realization of, oh, it's just plastic, that is the perfect microcosm of what the literature calls the evolutionary mismatch.
Evolutionary mismatch.
Yeah.
It sounds like a polite way of saying we aren't built for the world we built.
That is exactly what it is. A mismatch occurs when an organism's environment changes faster than its biology can adapt.
And our environment has changed at what, light speed, biologically speaking?
Absolutely. If you look at the timeline of human history, it's basically flat for hundreds of thousands of years. And then in the last tiny fraction of a second, we invented agriculture, cities, corporations, and the internet.
And our biology is still back there on the savannah.
It's still back there, expecting physical predation, but our environment is throwing symbolic threats at us nonstop.
And that's the kicker, right? The symbolic threat. Because the guy in the library, okay, his body reacted to a toy spider. But for most of us, it's not spiders. It's an email. It's the sound of a Slack notification. It's seeing your boss's name pop up on your phone.
And the shame that man felt, that I'm stupid for reacting this way, that is the uniquely modern twist. A gazelle doesn't feel shame after jumping at a false alarm.
No, it just, shakes it off, goes back to grazing.
Exactly. It doesn't ruminate. It doesn't question its own sanity. But we have this layer of cognition, the prefrontal cortex, that judges our survival instincts. It berates the very system that got us here.
So that's really what this deep dive is about. It's about getting under the hood of that system.
Our mission today is to peel back that layer of judgment. We need to understand the evolutionary mismatch, really dissect the mechanics of what's called the amygdala hijack, and this is the most important part, look at the protocols.
The practical science-backed stuff.
Real hard science. How to reclaim executive function when that Stone Age brain tries to take the wheel.
We have to stop being passengers in our own nervous systems.
We have to learn to drive the machine. It's our machine, after all.
Okay, so I want to jump straight into the deep end of this, because this isn't just about jump scares in libraries. This mismatch, it destroys careers. It destroys peace of mind. To set the stage, I want to share a story from our source material that I think perfectly illustrates what you've called the corporate savannah. This is where the mismatch goes from being a quirk to being a serious liability.
The modern jungle.
The modern jungle, exactly. I heard a story recently about a senior vice president at a tech firm in San Francisco named Elias. By all external measures, Elias was at the pinnacle of the modern corporate hierarchy. Yet his body was betraying him. Every time he stood before the board of directors, his pulse would skyrocket to 140 beats per minute, his palms would grow slick, and his breath would become shallow and ragged. To his amygdala, that ancient almond-shaped sentinel, the board members weren't colleagues. They were apex predators encircling him on a prehistoric savanna. This is the evolutionary mismatch in its purest form. His brain was using a survival script written 50,000 years ago to navigate a Q4 earnings report. He wasn't weak. He was simply operating on legacy hardware that hadn't received a software update for the digital age. When I look at Elias's situation, I can't help but feel a deep sense of empathy for the modern professional. We've built a world of glass and silicon, but we're still walking around with the nervous systems of hunter-gatherers. It's a reminder that our physiological reactions aren't always a reflection of our competence, but rather a stubborn relic of our will to survive. Understanding this doesn't diminish the pressure of the corporate ladder, but it does allow us to see our performance anxiety for what it truly is. An overprotective friend that doesn't realize the lions have been gone for a long time.
Elias's story is, it's heartbreaking on a personal level, but it's also biologically fascinating. It is the textbook definition of evolutionary mismatch theory in a high-stakes environment.
Let's dig into that textbook definition, because usually when I think of evolution, I think of survival of the fittest. If we are the fittest, shouldn't we be adapted to our environment? Why hasn't the anxiety evolved out of us by now?
That's a great question. And the answer lies entirely in the speed of change. Evolution works on timescales of tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of years. Cultural and technological evolution, as we said, works on timescales of decades or even years now.
But we're running beta software that hasn't been patched.
We are, and it's full of bugs when you run it in the wrong environment. Think about the example of moths. You know how moths fly into porch lights?
Right, or into a candle flame. We usually think, stupid moth.
Exactly. But the moth isn't stupid. For millions of years, the moth evolved a brilliant navigation system called transverse orientation. It used the moon, a light source, at what's called optical infinity, to fly in a straight line.
So it keeps the moon at a constant angle to its eye.
Perfect. If you do that, you fly straight. It was a brilliant adaptation, flawless for a world with only one big bright light at night.
And then humans invented fire, and then the light bulb.
And suddenly, the environment is full of moons, artificial moons. The moth's instinct hasn't changed, but the context is completely flipped. It spirals into the flame not because it's broken, but because its perfect navigation system is mismatched with the new reality.
Elias is the moth.
Elias is the moth, and the boardroom is the street lamp.
And his heart rate, the sweating, the blood diversion, those are his version of spiraling into the flame.
They're adaptations designed to help him survive a physical confrontation with a predator or a hostile tribe. But in the boardroom, those adaptations become maladaptive. They make him look weak, shaky, incompetent. The very things that would save his life on the savannah threaten his livelihood in the city.
But wait, I have to push back a little here. A board meeting is stressful, sure. But is it really hostile tribe level? Nobody is going to physically attack Elias. Why does his brain treat a Q4 report like a death sentence? That feels like a glitch, not a feature.
It feels like a glitch to us now, to our modern rational minds. But you have to look at what the research calls the savannah principle. Our brains, our social software, evolved in the context of small nomadic tribes.
Dunbar's number, right? The 150-person limit.
That's the one. Roughly 50 to 150 people. In that setting, social standing wasn't just about ego or feeling good. It was, quite literally, about survival.
Because if you get kicked out.
If you are ostracized from a tribe of 50 people on the savannah, you die, period. You starve, or a leopard gets you. There's no going solo. There's no other tribe to join down the road.
So, okay, your brain learns that social rejection equals death.
It's a one-to-one correlation. So the amygdala learned to treat threats to status with the same chemical urgency as threats to life. It can't tell the difference.
So when Elias sees a board member frown or check their watch, his amygdala isn't seeing negative feedback on slide 7. It's seeing exile imminent. Death is coming.
That's the signal it sends. And this creates what we call crowding stress and status anxiety. In the modern world, you might walk past more people on your way to work than your ancestors saw in a year. We have these massive abstract hierarchies in corporations.
But the brain is still trying to secure your spot in that little tribe of 150.
So when Elias stands up there, he's not just giving a presentation. He is engaging in what evolutionary psychologists call agonic interaction.
Agonic interaction. That sounds painful. What does that mean?
It comes from the Greek word agon, which means struggle or contest. It's a mode of social interaction based on hierarchy, threat, and power. It's about dominance and submission.
Alpha versus beta.
Alpha versus beta, exactly. It's about not losing your rank. The alternative is called hedonic interaction, which is about affiliation, safety, cooperation. But many corporate structures, especially at the executive level, are almost purely agonic.
So Elias's brain thinks he's in a fight for his position in the hierarchy.
And that's why he freezes. It's not just random panic. It's a specific biological strategy that gets triggered. It's called the Involuntary Subordinate Strategy, or ISS. But before we get to that, we need to understand the sheer mechanics of the freeze itself.
Yeah, let's talk about the mechanics. Because Elias is a smart guy, he's a senior VP, he knows the numbers, he prepared for weeks. Why, in that moment, does his IQ seem to drop 50 points? Why can't he just think his way out of the panic?
This is the critical piece. We tend to think of the brain as one unified computer with the self in the driver's seat, but it's not. It's a coalition of different systems that sometimes compete for control.
And in this case, the wrong system is winning.
The older, faster system is winning. To understand Elias's brain freeze, we need to look at the CD model.
SIDA, okay, that stands for stress-induced deliberation to intuition.
Correct. It's a model that describes the shift between your two main operating systems, which you might know from Daniel Kahneman's work as System 1 and System 2.
Right, thinking fast and slow. System 2 is the slow, logical one.
Yes. System 2 is your prefrontal cortex. This is the CEO of your brain. It's slow, deliberate, logical, and analytical. It handles spreadsheets, long-term strategy, and complex language.
And System 1?
System 1 is the subcortical brain, the amygdala, the basal ganglia. It's the security guard. It's incredibly fast, intuitive, emotional, and it runs on habit and pattern recognition.
CEO versus security guard. A pretty clear hierarchy, you'd think.
You'd think. Under normal conditions, they talk. The security guard sees something, calls the CEO upstairs. The CEO calmly assesses the situation and makes a decision. But under high stress, like the perceived threat of the board meeting, the city model kicks in. The brain detects danger and initiates a physiological takeover. The security guard pulls the fire alarm and puts the building on lockdown.
What does that takeover look like physically? What's happening inside his body?
It's a massive resource reallocation. The amygdala screams emergency, and the adrenal glands release a flood of cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate and blood pressure skyrocket. But crucially, the body shunts blood away from the non-essential systems.
And non-essential in a fight for your life includes?
Digestion, the immune system, and the prefrontal cortex.
Wait, literally, the blood leaves the thinking part of the brain.
Literally. The blood is sent to the major muscle groups, the thighs, the biceps, the shoulders. Because if you're about to fight a lion or run from a rival tribe, you don't need to do long division or contemplate the nuances of market share. You need to run or punch.
This causes what's called cortical inhibition.
You become, in a very real physiological sense, less intelligent. Your working memory capacity shrinks, your ability to process complex information vanishes.
That explains the blank stare. The lights are on, but the CEO is locked in the closet and the security guard is running the show.
Exactly. The brain shifts control from System 2 deliberation to System 1 intuition. And what does System 1 rely on?
Habit. Gut feeling.
Right. And in a complex, novel situation like a board meeting, your gut has no useful data. It just has fear. So if your habit is to fight, you might get aggressive and say something rash. If your habit is to flee, you might stammer and want to leave. If your habit is to freeze, you go silent, like Elias.
He loses access to his complex vocabulary and nuance because the part of his brain that holds those tools is literally offline, starved of blood.
Fine. You spend your whole career building that sophisticated CEO intelligence, and in the moment you need it most, the security guard cuts the power to the executive suite.
And you mentioned it gets worse.
Because once System 1 takes over, it induces a state of hypervigilance and attentional bias. The brain doesn't just react to the threat, it starts actively scanning for more threats to justify the panic it's already feeling.
It's looking for proof that the panic is right. It's confirmation bias on steroids.
Exactly. So Elias looks out at the board of directors. Maybe one guy is just hungry and has a grumpy expression. Maybe someone else is checking an urgent text from their kid. But Elias's hypervigilant amygdala doesn't see that. It interprets every neutral face as an angry face. It interprets every glance as a judgment.
He starts hallucinating a hostile environment.
And that hallucination pumps more adrenaline and cortisol into his system, which shuts down the cortex even more, which makes him even more likely to misinterpret neutral cues as threats. It's a feedback loop from hell.
So he's trapped. He's in a self-fulfilling prophecy of terror, and it's all happening in microseconds, completely outside of his conscious control.
Driven entirely by a beautiful, elegant mechanism that was designed to save him from a leopard. The mismatch is the tragedy.
This brings us to the internal experience of this, because we've talked about the biology, the mechanics, but for the person going through it, for Elias, for the guy in the library, for you, for me, it feels personal. It feels like a character flaw.
And that transition from biological event to moral judgment is where the suffering really, really sets in. The initial panic is just a signal. The shame is the poison.
I want to share a second story that really touched me because it deals with this exact internal battle. It's about a guy named Julian and how he reframed this whole experience. I was scrolling through a forum the other day and came across the journey of a man named Julian. For years, Julian lived in a state of quiet shame, believing his chronic social anxiety was a moral failing, a sign that he lacked the grit or alpha qualities required to thrive in a competitive social hierarchy. He viewed his racing heart as a character flaw. However, everything changed when he began to view his anxiety through the lens of biological determinism. He started to see his amygdala not as his soul, but as a biological sensor, a piece of equipment. When the panic hit, he would tell himself, "This is just a primitive survival signal. My sensor is misfiring." By demoralizing his condition, he reclaimed his psychological sovereignty. He stopped asking, "What is wrong with me?" and started asking, "What is my amygdala reacting to?" This perspective is quite powerful, though I know some might find the term biological determinism a bit clinical or even polarizing in how it frames human nature. But from my vantage point as someone who analyzes these trends, there is something incredibly liberating about removing the guilt from mental health. When we stop viewing anxiety as a personal failure of the will, we actually gain more control, not less. It's about understanding the mechanics of the machine so you can drive it better. It's not about being cold or robotic, but about finding peace by acknowledging that our biology has its own logic, separate from our identity.
Demoralizing the condition. That is such a powerful phrase. Julian hit on something absolutely essential there. He stopped treating the symptom as a sin.
It's the defect fallacy again, isn't it? We think if I'm anxious, I'm weak, I'm defective. But you're suggesting that anxiety is actually a strength, or at least a calculated strategy from our evolutionary past.
It's a successful adaptation. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Think about it using the smoke detector principle. If you are an engineer designing a smoke detector for a house, how do you calibrate it? You have two choices.
Okay.
You can make it very insensitive so it only goes off if the house is absolutely, definitely 100% burning to the ground. Or you can make it hypersensitive so it goes off at the slightest whiff of burnt toast from the kitchen.
Well, if I make it insensitive and I miss a real fire, I die. The cost is infinite. If I make it sensitive, the cost is just annoyance. I have to wave a towel at it.
The cost of a false negative missing a real threat is catastrophic. The cost of a false positive reacting to a non-threat is minimal. Evolution is a risk-averse engineer. It designed your amygdala to be the sensitive smoke detector.
So it would rather you panic 99 times over nothing than miss the one time there's a tiger in the bushes.
Yes. So Julian's anxiety isn't a sign that he's broken. It's a sign he has a high-quality, factory-standard, top-of-the-line survival system. His smoke detector works perfectly. It's just installed in a modern kitchen, not a dry forest.
That's a huge reframe.
But there's another layer to Julian's story that I find even more profound. He mentioned alpha qualities and the social hierarchy. This connects directly to a concept in ethology called resource holding potential, or RHP.
RHP. Okay, break that down for me.
Before any social animal enters a conflict over food, mates, or territory, it runs a split-second internal calculation. It's subconscious. It assesses its own fighting ability, its size, its strength, its health, its allies versus the opponents. That comparison is the resource holding potential.
It's a quick and dirty threat assessment. Can I take him?
Basically. Am I likely to win this encounter? Now here is the controversial part, the part that connects to Julian. If the brain calculates that the threat is greater than your current resources, if it decides you will almost certainly lose this fight, what does it do?
It tells you to run away. Fight or flight.
Sometimes. But often in a structured social group, you can't just run. So it initiates the Involuntary Subordinate Strategy, ISS.
We mentioned this with Elias. The surrender button.
The surrender button. It shuts you down. It inhibits your aggression. It lowers your mood. It slumps your posture. It kills your motivation. It makes you want to hide and be invisible. It mimics almost perfectly what we call clinical depression or extreme social anxiety.
You're saying that the feeling of, I just want to hide in bed or I can't face the world today is a biological strategy to keep you from getting beat up by the tribe's alpha.
It is a yield signal. It's a preemptive surrender. In the wild, if you challenge the alpha and you're weaker, you get hurt, maybe badly. But if you signal submission, if you make yourself small and non-threatening, the alpha usually leaves you alone. You survive to try again another day.
So Julian's brain, in those social situations he feared, was looking at the alphas in the room, the confident, outgoing people.
Calculating that he couldn't compete in that moment.
And hitting the depression switch to save his life, to keep him from making a social challenge that his brain thought he would lose.
He wasn't a coward. His brain was actively and intelligently trying to protect him from a perceived dominance conflict. It was benching them to prevent a social injury that, to the amygdala, feels just as real as a physical one.
That is. Wow. I mean, it completely flips the narrative. He's judging himself for being low grit, for not being alpha enough, but his biology is congratulating itself on being a master tactician of survival.
And that is why biological determinism, as he called it, was so liberating. He could finally look at that feeling and say, I see what you're doing. Thank you, amygdala, for trying to save me from the alpha. I appreciate the concern. But this is just a cocktail party, and I'm actually allowed to speak.
He separated the signal from the self. He put a little bit of space between the ancient biological feeling and his modern identity.
That's the beginning of freedom. Once you realize your depression or anxiety is a stop command from an overzealous security guard, you can choose to override it. You can say, I hear the warning, but actually, I have the resources for this. I can handle this.
It's an incredible shift. We've looked at the boardroom with Elias, and we've looked at the internal monologue with Julian. But there is one more arena where this Stone Age software causes absolute chaos. Perhaps the most painful one for many people today. Modern dating.
The digital tribe. Yes. This is where the mismatch is arguably the most acute and the most punishing.
I want to bring in our third story now, about a young man named Leo. Imagine a young man named Leo navigating the relentless and often brutal landscape of modern digital dating. Every left swipe or ghosted message felt like a catastrophic blow to his market value, triggering a cortex-driven loop of rejection-themed ruminations. His amygdala interpreted social rejection as a threat to his very existence, just as it would have if he were being cast out of a tribe into the wilderness. To counter this, Leo practiced a form of cognitive exposure therapy. He intentionally put himself in low-stakes situations where rejection was likely, like asking for a small discount he knew he wouldn't get, or making a cold call for his business, forcing his amygdala to experience the threat and realize that he remained safe, rational, and dominant in his own life despite it. He dismantled the fear by proving to his brain that a digital no wasn't a death sentence. Watching Leo's story unfold, it's clear how much the digital age has amplified our primal fears of being excluded. The language of market value in dating can feel harsh or overly transactional, and I certainly understand why that might rub people the wrong way. However, if we look past the terminology, the core lesson is about resilience. By using exposure to deconstruct our fears, we prevent the amygdala from hijacking our rational minds. It's a strategy for maintaining one's sense of self in a world that often feels like a giant judgmental algorithm. In the end, it's about protecting our human capacity for connection by mastering the biological triggers that try to keep us small and afraid.
Leo is dealing with something we culturally minimize far too often: the physical reality of rejection. We tell people, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Biologically, that is an absolute lie.
The sources mentioned abandonment trauma and how the brain maps rejection. Is it really true that the brain can't tell the difference between a breakup and a broken leg?
It's shockingly close to true. Neuroimaging studies using fMRI scans have shown that when a person experiences social rejection, even something as simple as being left out of a game of online catch, the brain activates the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula.
And those are the pain centers.
Those are the exact same regions that light up when you experience physical pain. From a neurological perspective, a broken heart isn't a metaphor.
It's a physical event.
It's a physical event. To your brain, being ghosted is an injury. And again, look at the ancestry. It makes perfect sense. If the tribe rejects you, pain is the necessary warning system. Pain is what screams, fix this relationship immediately or you will die. The brain uses the existing pain network to coerce you into maintaining social bonds.
But in the digital age, we face rejection at a scale that is completely unprecedented. Leo isn't just getting rejected by the one person in the neighboring clan. He's getting rejected by an algorithm, by hundreds of people he's never even met.
It's what you could call hyper-rejection. We are exposed to more instances of social rejection in a single month of using a dating app than our ancestors likely faced in their entire lifetime. And the amygdala treats every single one of those micro-rejections as a potential exile event. It wears us down. It's death by 1,000 cuts.
There was another concept in the notes that I found really interesting, the idea of a partner as a background object or a biofeedback regulator. It sounded almost like we're using people as furniture, but I know it means something deeper than that.
It's a clinical term, but it's not as cold as it sounds. It means that as social mammals, we are an open-loop system. We don't self-regulate in a vacuum. We rely on our close, trusted relationships to regulate our own physiology. A secure partner, a parent, a best friend, a spouse helps regulate your heart rate, your breathing, your sleep cycles, your cortisol levels, just by being a stable presence. You literally sync up your biological rhythms with them.
So when that person disappears, when you get ghosted or dumped, it's not just an emotional loss of, I miss them. It's a physiological crisis of, my external regulator is gone.
Your biological rhythms are thrown into chaos, sleep disrupts, anxiety spikes, you might lose your appetite. Leo wasn't just feeling sad, his body was going into a state of physiological withdrawal from a key regulator.
Which, of course, the amygdala interprets as, I'm alone and vulnerable on the savannah.
And the panic cycle continues. But Leo did something very smart and very counterintuitive. He didn't hide from the fear. He went out and sought rejection on his own terms. He used exposure therapy.
How does getting rejected more help cure the fear of rejection? That seems like it would just make it worse.
This is the most effective and often the most difficult way to patch the software. The amygdala does not learn through logic. You cannot sit in your room and think your way out of a phobia. You can't reason with the security guard.
So if I'm afraid of dogs, reading a book about how friendly dogs are does absolutely nothing.
Zero. The amygdala learns through experience. It learns through association and prediction error.
Prediction error.
Leo's amygdala had a hardwired equation. Rejection, catastrophe, death. That was its prediction. By intentionally seeking out low-stakes rejection, where the outcome was not catastrophic, he created a prediction error. He forced his brain to confront the data. I was rejected, and yet I survived.
He proved to the security guard that the threat was a false alarm.
He did it over and over. He experienced the trigger, rejection, without the feared negative consequence, death, harm, total social collapse. Each time he did this, he overwrote a tiny piece of the Stone Age code with a new, more accurate line of modern code. Rejection is unpleasant, but it is safe.
That's the only way to lower the alarm threshold. You have to show the brain, not just tell it.
You have to let it experience the new reality.
This transitions perfectly into our final section, which is what everyone is waiting for. We've diagnosed the problem, Stone Age hardware in a digital world. We know why Elias freezes, why Julian feels shame, and why Leo hurts. But we need a manual. If we can't delete the amygdala, how do we lead it?
We need a protocol, a set of operating instructions. The Iron Mind source material offers a fantastic framework for this. It's an acronym called the LEADER model. It's designed specifically to help you regain executive control to put the CEO back in charge during an amygdala hijack.
Okay, let's walk through this letter by letter. L is for listen deeply.
But this isn't about listening to a podcast or another person. It's about listening to your body. The hijack, as we've said, starts physically, often before your conscious mind even registers the threat. Your stomach drops, your jaw tightens, your breath gets shallow, you feel a tightness in your chest.
It's the rumble before the earthquake, the first tremor.
Exactly. Most of us are trained to ignore those signals, to power through. But L is about interception. If you can learn to notice that first physical signal, that tightening in your gut, you can catch the hijack at the tremble stage.
And if you wait until the full-blown panic attack, it's much harder to stop.
It's like trying to stop a runaway train once it's at full speed. Much easier to apply the brakes when it's just starting to leave the station.
Okay, so we've listened, we've caught the signal. Next is E, for established clarity. This involves the 6-second rule. Is this just another way of saying count to 10?
It's the biology behind why counting to 10 works. When the amygdala fires that initial alarm, it dumps a massive load of chemicals like adrenaline into your bloodstream. It takes approximately 6 seconds for that initial intense chemical wave to be metabolized and for the blood flow to start returning to the prefrontal cortex.
So you're not just calming down, you're literally waiting out the chemical surge.
Yes. If you react in second 1, you are reacting on pure, unfiltered adrenaline. You will say something stupid or you'll run away. If you force a pause, you count back from 100 by 7s, you feel your feet on the floor, you name 5 blue things you see in the room, you are buying your CEO precious seconds to get back to the office and assess the situation rationally.
You're buying time for your rational brain to come back online. Okay, A is for act decisively. This one surprised me. I thought the goal was to be calm and zen and do nothing.
You pause to clear the fog, but then you must act. Anxiety at its core thrives on a feeling of hopelessness. The freeze state that hits Elias is a state of total powerlessness.
So any action breaks that spell.
Any small, decisive action signals to your brain, I am not helpless, I have agency, I am in control of something. It could be as simple as taking a deliberate sip of water, straightening your posture, organizing the papers in front of you, or making the conscious choice to speak.
You break the paralysis.
You prove to the amygdala that you are not a helpless victim of the situation. You are an agent. That feeling of agency is the direct antidote to the feeling of panic.
D is for demonstrate stability.
This is for the benefit of the tribe, whether your tribe is your family, your team at work, or the board of directors. We have mirror neurons. We are deeply social creatures. We subconsciously catch each other's emotional states.
Emotional contagion.
Yes. If you are the leader or a parent or a partner and you are visibly panicking, your panic will infect everyone else in the room. But if you can regulate your own breathing, your tone of voice, your posture, you literally help regulate the nervous systems of the people around you.
You become the thermostat for the room, not the thermometer.
Beautifully put. E is empower others. This is a powerful shift. It moves your brain from a state of me versus the threat to us versus the problem.
So you're engaging the social part of your brain.
You're engaging the social engagement system, which is neurobiologically opposed to the fight or flight system. You can't be in both at once. By asking a collaborative question like, what are your thoughts on this? Or how can we approach this together? You're not just being a good leader.
You're actually calming yourself down.
Yes, because it forces your brain out of survival mode and into an analytical cooperative mode. It signals safety and affiliation.
And finally, R is reflect. This happens after the fact.
Post-game analysis. You can't learn and build resilience if you don't review the tape. After the adrenaline has faded, maybe that evening or the next day, you look back. What exactly triggered me? What was the story I told myself in that moment? Why did I feel like I didn't have the resources to handle it?
This is how you train the brain for next time. You cement the learning.
Exactly. You build a library of successful strategies.
I love that LEADER framework. It's so practical. But I want to close with what the notes call the biohacks. This is about communicating with the amygdala. We said you can't use logic, but there are back doors into the system, right? Ways to speak its language.
Yes. This is bottom-up regulation instead of top-down. If you can't talk to the amygdala through the prefrontal cortex, you have to speak its native language. And its language is chemistry and physics. It's the language of the body.
Let's hit the big ones. First, breathing. Why does every single piece of advice about anxiety start with take a deep breath?
Because it's the most direct and powerful lever we have. It's not just to distract you.
Yeah.
Your brainstem, which is right next to the amygdala, constantly monitors carbon dioxide levels in your blood. When you panic, you take short, shallow breaths, you hyperventilate,
Right.
CO2 builds up in your blood. The brainstem reads this high CO2 level as a direct sign of suffocation risk and tells the amygdala to panic even harder.
So your shallow breathing is telling your brain that you're choking to death.
Yes. By taking slow, deep, rhythmic breaths, especially making the exhale longer than the inhale, you blow off that excess CO2. You send a direct physical signal of the vagus nerve to the brain that says, I am breathing freely. Therefore, I am not being chased. I am not suffocating. I am safe. It is the only truly manual brake pedal we have for the autonomic nervous system.
Okay, next up, sleep. Specifically, REM sleep.
This is huge and so underrated. REM sleep is essentially overnight emotional therapy. It's the phase of sleep where the brain processes the emotional memories from the day. It takes the sting out of them. It files them away without the intense emotional charge.
It detoxifies the day's emotional events.
That's a perfect way to put it. If you are chronically sleep deprived, you're skipping that therapy session every night. Your amygdala doesn't get a chance to reset. It becomes hyper-reactive. Every little stressor feels like a major crisis.
It's like driving a car with the brake lines cut.
Yeah.
Everything is more jarring.
You are running on raw nerve. Everything hurts more. Every threat seems bigger. Getting a full 90-minute sleep cycle is non-negotiable for emotional regulation.
That's exercise.
Remember the Site model. When you got stressed, the body dumped fuel, adrenaline, and cortisol into your blood to prepare you to fight or flee the tiger. If you then just sit in your office chair stewing in that stress, that fuel becomes toxic. It has nowhere to go. It keeps you agitated and on edge.
So exercise is how you burn it off.
Exercise completes the stress cycle. It does what your body was preparing to do. It tells the brain, we fought, we ran, we escaped. The danger is over. We can stand down now. It closes the loop. Plus, it generates new neural connections and releases endorphins.
It literally metabolizes the anxiety.
Yeah.
And finally, diet. The hangry phenomenon is real.
Very real. The amygdala is a huge energy consumer. It has its own glucose sensor. If your blood sugar drops too low, the brain perceives a resource crisis. It interprets hunger as famine is coming, resources are scarce, danger is high.
So it lowers the threshold for panic.
Drastically. A situation you could normally handle with ease becomes overwhelming when your blood sugar is low. Keeping your blood sugar stable with balanced meals is a frontline defense against an overactive amygdala.
And of course, the last one is exposure, which we learned from Leo's story. Deliberately and safely facing the triggers to reset the alarm system.
It is the hardest, but it is the most permanent fix. You have to prove the safety to the animal part of your brain.
It's incredible. We started this deep dive with a plastic spider in a library, and we've ended up with a user manual for the modern human brain. We've gone from the African savannah to the corporate boardroom, realized that our anxiety isn't a defect, but a legacy feature.
A feature, not a bug.
A feature, not a bug. And we've learned that while we can't uninstall the amygdala, we can certainly learn to lead it.
Absolutely. We have to remember, we are not broken for feeling anxious. We are the descendants of the anxious survivors. That alarm system is the very reason we are here having this conversation. It's a sign of a successful lineage.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. Instead of fighting the fear or being ashamed of it, we recognize it for what it is.
Exactly. And this brings us to a final thought for you to take away.
Yeah.
We spend so much time and energy trying to silence our fear, treating it like an enemy in the room, trying to argue with it or suppress it. But maybe the goal isn't to silence the alarm,
but to understand it.
To understand it and to thank it for doing its job. And then firmly, calmly tell it that you are the one driving the car. Because if you don't take the wheel, your Stone Age passenger will, and he's a great backseat driver, but he doesn't know the way to where you're going.